Hello, everyone, and welcome to Practice English TV. I'm Mark, and we're really happy you're here with us today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emma. Thanks for joining us, wherever you're listening from.
Today's episode is about a very real and relatable topic, talking about mental health in everyday life.
Yeah, especially those quiet moments when you feel mentally tired, emotionally overwhelmed, or like your mind just won't fully slow down.
We'll talk about realistic situations, overthinking, work stress, emotional exhaustion, and the small everyday feelings that many people experience but don't always talk about openly.
And if you've ever felt drained after a long day, struggled to explain your emotions, or felt pressure to always seem okay, you're definitely not alone.
And if you enjoy learning English with us, don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with another English learner.
Thank you so much for being here and learning with us today. Let's begin and talk about mental health together.
I was thinking about this the other day. Sometimes people say, I'm tired, but they don't really mean physically tired.
Yeah, it's more like mental exhaustion.
Right, your body feels okay, but your mind feels heavy all the time.
And it can happen even when nothing dramatic is going on.
Exactly. You wake up, go to work, answer messages, do normal things, but somehow you still feel drained.
I've had days like that recently. I come home after work and just sit quietly for a while because my brain feels full.
And sometimes people around you don't notice it because you still look normal.
That's true. You smile, talk normally, maybe even joke around a little, but inside you're thinking, I really need a break.
I think a lot of people feel pressure to always seem okay.
Especially at work, sometimes you're stressed, but you still have to act positive all day.
And after doing that for hours, you feel emotionally exhausted.
When I'm mentally tired, even simple things suddenly feel difficult.
Like what?
Replying to messages, cleaning my room, even deciding what to eat.
Yeah, I understand that. Your energy becomes really low.
And then, sometimes I feel guilty because I think, why can't I handle simple things today?
I think that feeling is very common.
One night, I stayed up for almost 2 hours because I couldn't stop thinking.
Overthinking?
Yeah, work, the future, random conversations, everything at once.
That's the worst feeling. Your body is tired, but your brain keeps moving.
Exactly, and then you wake up already exhausted the next morning.
I had a similar moment recently. I was sitting at my desk trying to work, but I just stared at the screen doing nothing.
Yeah,
I wasn't lazy, I just felt mentally stuck.
I think people experience that more often than they admit.
Probably, but many people feel uncomfortable talking about it.
Maybe because they think they need a good reason to feel overwhelmed.
That's true.
Sometimes friends invite you out, and normally you would say yes, but mentally you feel too tired to socialize.
Yeah, sometimes staying home quietly just feels better.
Or maybe you simply want someone to listen without trying to fix everything immediately.
That's important. Sometimes people don't need advice first, they just want to feel understood.
I remember talking to a friend after a really stressful week. I kept saying, I don't know why I feel like this.
And what did they say?
Not much. They just listened and said, you sound really tired.
That probably felt comforting.
Yeah, it really did. It made me feel less alone somehow.
I think small moments like that matter a lot.
Definitely. Sometimes kindness is simply listening carefully.
You know what's interesting? Sometimes mental stress builds up so slowly that you don't notice it at first.
Yeah, it's usually not one huge problem. It's a lot of small things happening for too long.
Exactly. Work pressure, lack of sleep, too much screen time, it all adds up.
I had a period like that a few months ago. Nothing terrible happened, but I constantly felt emotionally tired.
What was it like?
Honestly, I would wake up already stressed before the day even started.
Yeah, that feeling is hard to explain.
And small problems suddenly felt much bigger than they really were.
Like your brain had no extra energy left.
Exactly. One morning, I spilled coffee on my shirt before work and I almost cried over it.
I actually understand that.
At the time, it felt like my brain just couldn't handle one more thing.
Yeah, sometimes you're already carrying too much inside.
And I still spent the whole day pretending to be cheerful at work.
That's exhausting too.
Definitely. By the time I got home, I didn't even want to talk to anyone.
I think a lot of people need quiet time after emotionally heavy days.
For me, I just wanted silence for a while. No music, no messages, nothing.
That actually sounds peaceful.
Yeah, it helped a little.
I had a similar experience recently. I was overthinking almost every night before sleeping.
About work?
Partly work, partly life in general. Just random thoughts repeating in my head.
That's the worst kind of overthinking.
1 minute I'm thinking about emails, then suddenly I'm remembering an awkward conversation from 3 years ago.
Why does the brain do that at night?
I honestly don't know.
And then you try harder to sleep, which somehow makes sleeping even more difficult.
Exactly.
Here's another thing I noticed. When I'm mentally exhausted, I stop enjoying things I normally like.
That happens to me too sometimes.
I'll start watching a show, and after 10 minutes, I completely lose focus.
Or you scroll on your phone without really paying attention to anything.
Yes, exactly.
A friend told me something recently that stayed in my mind. He said, "I'm tired of always trying to keep up."
Wow, that feels very real.
Yeah, work, responsibilities, social media. Sometimes people feel pressure to constantly do more.
And when you finally slow down, you realize how exhausted you actually are.
There's also this feeling of guilt when you rest.
Oh, yes, like you should always be productive.
Exactly.
I've definitely felt that before. I would sit down to relax, but my brain would say, "You're wasting time."
That inner voice can be really tiring.
It can, and sometimes you just need someone to remind you that resting is okay.
Not every difficult feeling needs a perfect explanation.
Yeah, sometimes you're simply mentally tired, and that's already enough of a reason to slow down a little.
Let's slow down a little and look at some common words and phrases people use when talking about stress and emotions in everyday life.
Yeah, these are very natural expressions people use with friends, coworkers, or family members.
One common phrase is mentally tired.
This means your mind feels exhausted, even if your body feels okay.
For example, someone might say, "I'm physically fine, but I'm mentally tired."
Another common word is stressed.
People usually say this when life or work feels overwhelming.
You might hear, "Work has been really stressful lately."
Now let's talk about overthinking.
Overthinking means thinking about something too much, usually in a worried or anxious way.
For example, replaying conversations in your head again and again.
Someone might say, "I couldn't sleep because I was overthinking."
Another useful phrase is feeling overwhelmed.
That means everything feels like too much at once.
Here's a small situation. You have deadlines, messages, responsibilities, and problems all happening at once.
You might say, "I feel really overwhelmed right now."
Another phrase people use a lot is, "I need a break."
Sometimes this means you need mental rest, not just physical rest.
You may also hear, "I need some space."
That usually means someone wants quiet time alone to relax or think.
Another very common phrase is burned out.
Like when work or stress has exhausted you for a long time.
For example, "I think I'm burned out."
Now, let's look at softer ways people express difficult feelings.
Sometimes people say, "I haven't felt like myself lately."
Or, "I've been having a hard time recently."
These expressions sound gentle and natural in conversation.
Another phrase people use is emotionally drained.
That means emotionally exhausted after stress or pressure.
Someone might say, "After this week, I feel emotionally drained."
Here's another small situation. A friend asks how you're doing.
Instead of saying, "I'm fine," you answer honestly and say, "I've been a little stressed lately."
That's simple, natural, and very human.
Now, let's talk about supportive responses.
If someone shares their feelings with you, you don't always need perfect advice.
Sometimes simple responses are enough.
Like, that sounds really exhausting.
Or, "I'm sorry you're dealing with that."
Another gentle response is, I'm here if you want to talk.
These phrases feel warm and supportive without sounding too heavy.
The important thing is not using perfect English.
It's expressing real feelings clearly and naturally.
Let's imagine two friends meeting after work in a quiet coffee shop. It's been a long week and they finally have time to sit down and talk.
Yeah, sometimes you don't realize how much you need a calm conversation until you finally slow down for a minute.
Exactly. So, how have you been lately? Like, really?
Honestly, a little overwhelmed.
Yeah?
Yeah, the past few weeks have felt strangely heavy.
Work stress?
Partly, but mostly I feel like my brain never fully relaxes anymore.
Like your mind is always busy?
Exactly. Even when I'm home, I keep thinking about work, messages, responsibilities, everything.
That gets exhausting after a while.
It really does.
Have you been sleeping okay?
Not really. Some nights I'm exhausted, but then I lie in bed overthinking for hours.
Yeah, nighttime overthinking feels different somehow.
Last night, I kept replaying a conversation from work in my head.
Something awkward?
Kind of. Honestly, it probably wasn't even important, but my brain kept acting like it was.
I do that too. One tiny awkward moment suddenly becomes a full movie in your head.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've been feeling tired even after resting lately.
That's such a strange feeling.
Yeah, physically I'm resting, but mentally I still feel drained.
I think emotional stress stays with you longer than people realize.
Probably. Sometimes I sit quietly in my car for a few minutes before going inside my apartment.
Honestly, I've done that too.
Really?
Yeah, just sitting there in silence because my brain needs a pause before talking to people again.
That makes complete sense.
Sometimes people think being tired only comes from physical work.
But emotional exhaustion is real too.
Definitely.
A friend invited me out for dinner recently, and normally I would have gone.
But you didn't feel up to it?
Yeah, I wanted to go, but mentally I felt too tired to socialize.
And then you probably felt guilty for saying no.
Exactly.
I think a lot of people experience that quietly.
Probably because they worry it sounds rude.
Yeah, when really sometimes people just need rest and quiet.
I've also noticed that when I'm mentally exhausted, even replying to messages feels difficult.
Same. And then more time passes and answering feels even more stressful.
Exactly.
One thing that helps me sometimes is going for a walk without my phone.
That actually sounds really nice.
Yeah, no music, no notifications, no videos, just walking quietly for a while.
I think our brains don't get enough quiet anymore.
Probably not.
You know something else I've been thinking about? People often feel guilty when they rest.
Oh, definitely.
Like if you spend one day doing nothing, part of your brain says you should be productive,
Yes, even relaxing can feel stressful sometimes.
which is honestly kind of sad.
Yeah, rest shouldn't feel like guilt.
I'm trying to remind myself that resting is not laziness.
That's an important thing to remember.
Honestly, conversations like this help me feel calmer.
Me too. Sometimes just feeling understood makes things feel a little lighter.
Let's go through a few useful phrases people often use when talking about stress, emotions, and mental health in everyday conversations.
Yeah, these are the kinds of expressions you'll hear naturally between friends or coworkers.
One common phrase is, "I've been feeling off lately."
Feeling off means you don't quite feel normal, even if you can't fully explain why.
For example, "I don't know what it is. I've just been feeling off lately."
Another natural phrase is, my brain won't slow down.
People often say this when they can't stop thinking, especially at night.
For example, I tried to sleep, but my brain wouldn't slow down.
Another very common expression is, "I have a lot on my mind."
That means you're thinking about many things and feeling mentally busy.
You could say, "Sorry if I seem distracted. I just have a lot on my mind."
Another useful phrase is, I feel burned out.
People usually say this after dealing with stress for a long time.
For example, I think I need a break. I'm feeling burned out.
You may also hear people say, "I need some time to recharge."
This means they need rest to recover mentally and emotionally.
Now let's look at a small situation. Your friend notices you seem quiet.
They ask, are you okay?
Instead of saying, "I'm fine," you answer honestly and say, "I've just been stressed lately."
That sounds very natural and realistic.
Another phrase people use is, "I've been having a hard time lately."
That's a gentle and common way to talk about emotional struggles.
Now let's talk about supportive responses, because those matter a lot in real conversations.
Yeah, people often worry too much about saying the perfect thing.
But simple responses usually feel the most comforting.
For example, that sounds really difficult.
Or, "You've been dealing with a lot."
Another gentle response is, I'm glad you told me.
That sentence can make someone feel safe and understood.
Here's another small situation. Your friend says they feel overwhelmed.
Instead of immediately giving advice, you simply say, "That sounds exhausting."
And honestly, sometimes that helps more than trying to solve everything immediately.
Another natural phrase is, "I just need some quiet."
That one feels very real to me.
Same. Sometimes silence feels more helpful than anything else.
And wanting quiet or alone time doesn't mean you dislike people.
Right. Sometimes your mind simply needs space to breathe.
The important thing is learning how to express these feelings naturally and honestly.
And little by little, those conversations become easier. Before we finish today, let's talk about a few simple things that can help when life feels mentally heavy.
Yeah, nothing complicated, just small things that can make daily life feel a little easier.
One important thing is learning to notice when you're emotionally exhausted, not just physically tired.
Because sometimes people keep pushing themselves, even when they clearly need rest.
And after a while, even small tasks start feeling difficult.
So sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is pause for a moment without feeling guilty about it.
Another helpful thing is being honest with someone you trust.
Not necessarily a huge emotional conversation, even small, honest moments can help a lot.
Like saying, "I've been having a hard week," instead of pretending everything is fine.
Exactly. Constantly hiding stress can become exhausting too.
Here's a small situation that feels very common. Someone asks, "How are you?"
And usually people automatically say, I'm good.
But maybe this time you answer honestly and say, "I'm just really tired lately."
That small moment of honesty can actually feel relieving.
Another thing that helps is giving yourself quiet moments during the day.
Even 10 minutes without your phone or notifications can make a difference.
Sometimes the brain just needs silence for a little while.
And honestly, some days are simply harder than others.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean you're weak or failing.
It just means you're human.
Before we go, we have a simple question for you.
What do you usually do when you feel mentally tired or overwhelmed?
Maybe you go for a walk, listen to music, spend time alone, or talk to a friend.
And what helps you feel calm again after a stressful day? And if you'd like, you can write your answers in English in the comments.
That's a great way to practice and connect with other learners.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us today.
We hope this conversation felt relaxing and comforting in some small way.
Take care of yourself, keep practicing your English, and we'll see you again soon.